Is it 2022 yet? And if it was, would it make a difference? If we're just going to go around in circles again and again in COVID hell? Hi, I'm Brian Lilly. We've assembled the Sun jury to take a look at what was, but most importantly, what is coming up in the new year. Is it going to be any different, or are we set to repeat Groundhog Day all over again? Lauren Gunter, Laurie Goldstein, Danette Wilford, and Mark Daniel joining us. And Lauren, let me start with you. What are we going to see on the Justin Trudeau front from the federal government? I know you're in faraway Edmonton, but what are you looking for in 2022 from Team Trudeau?
Talk about Groundhog's Day. I mean, I think we're just going to see the same things over and over and over again. It works for them. They have found a formula for parceling up the country, parceling up voter blocks to keep themselves content. And they have, of course, most of the editorial boards and newsrooms of the country on their side. So they're just going to keep doing what works. It's like a football coach. You know, if you run a play and it works, you run it again and you run it again and you run it again until it stops working. And I just don't see anything from Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives that would put a roadblock in their way, or make a tackle, make a sack. The Trudeau government will upend itself once or twice during the year. It will do something ridiculous. It will do something outrageous. There will be a scandal. He will fly off to Tofino rather than going to the memorial for victims of L'École Polytechnique or something. He just can't stop himself from doing things like that because he's an intellectual lightweight.
But I want to get you to expand on this just a little bit before we move on. And you said they've been able to parcel up voters. Yeah. I mean, they won with less than 33% of the popular vote because they were able to say, well, we don't need 33% across the entire country, but we need this much of that group and this much of that group. I mean, it was really a disturbingly masterful attempt at saying
it is. And
find voters.
It bears repeating again and again and again that this was the government with the smallest percentage of the popular vote of any government in Canadian history. They have no mandate, but they have masterfully decided, this little group in downtown Toronto and this larger group in Metro Montreal and this small group in the core of Vancouver. We can get all of these groups with this message and that message, and they're very, very good at it. I mean, in some ways, this sounds like I think they're dastardly, and I think they are dastardly in some ways, but they are also, as you said, masterful, and you have to admire them for that. I mean, one of the reasons I think that Harper was as successful as he was for the Tories for as long as he was is that he mastered some of the same techniques and wasn't afraid to use them. Whereas Aaron O'Toole, I don't know whether he has this notion that he can somehow reunite the country, or if he's moderate, then there will be this groundswell of Canadians coming together. But the Liberals don't even make bones about it. Gerald Butts, after the election in September, Trudeau's longtime eminence grise, said, hey, congratulations to the War Room for finding the way to break up the country into enough small segments that you could put the pieces back together again to win government.
That sounds like a long discussion about the techniques of Dr. Evil, perhaps for another day. Before we get into the fun stuff of TV with Danette and movies with Mark, I got to ask Laurie Goldstein, because it's kind of related, Laurie. Climate. This is an issue that you specialize in, and almost every year some news association or editors group will say climate change is the biggest issue, and really, it's not. And pollsters have told me that it's the biggest issue when people are feeling good about themselves. Normally it's healthcare or jobs or things that affect their daily lives in a much more impactful way. But are we going to see anything different on the climate front, or is it more empty promises with a lot of hot air and greenhouse gas emissions rising up with it?
Yeah, there's two levels of that. There's Canada and internationally. And the answer to Canada is no, there won't be anything different. And the answer internationally is there won't be anything different. Right now, I mean, they just went to Glasgow and they had their big meeting and all the stuff about, you know, we got to lower emissions. Emissions are skyrocketing right now all over the world. All governments are scrambling for fossil fuel energy as they try to power themselves out of this recession. The only thing that's ever reduced emissions is recessions. The 2008-2009 economic recession globally caused emissions to drop dramatically. The 2020 COVID pandemic caused them to drop dramatically, but they are now going up again. So the whole thing about climate change is, look, everybody's worried about climate change, which means they're worried about increasingly severe weather. But those solutions are very long-term solutions. Even if we succeed in lowering our emissions the way the United Nations wants us to do. Classic illustration of the practical problem is that, let's take the horrible flooding in BC. And immediately the premier and others, this is climate change. No, it's not climate change. As many journalists covering that story pointed out, the government had been warned for years that their dike system wasn't being properly maintained, that it was going to collapse. And where was it likely to collapse? It was likely to collapse near a reclaimed lake that was in a floodplain that you put hundreds of thousands of people on since you reclaimed it a century ago. Politicians use climate change now as an excuse for not doing their jobs, not putting aside money for infrastructure, not keeping things up to code, keeping new building codes, tougher building codes, keep people out of floodplains. Don't let expensive homes be developed on coasts.
I saw that a couple of years ago in the Ottawa flooding. Up and down the Ottawa River, there was all this flooding and beautiful monster homes along the river front were flooded, and we were told it was climate change. And I'm thinking, no, you built right up next to the water on a floodplain. Like, it's been labeled a floodplain for a century. Why are you building there?
Well,
but
also,
people allow it to happen.
Remember that we've always had natural climate change. Rivers didn't flood. There weren't heat waves, drought, just because we started putting industrial greenhouse emissions into the atmosphere. There's a report by the Ontario Financial Accountability Office that says, just because if everything stayed the same, if the climate stayed the same now until 2100, which is impossible, the climate changes, but if everything stayed the same, the cost of maintaining the existing infrastructure in Ontario, public infrastructure, is $799 billion or $10 billion a year, right? If we have the added problem of more severe weather because of climate change, then it adds up even more. But that's the basic, look, all these things are going to continue. There will be flooding, there will be droughts. It doesn't matter what causes them, right? We have to adapt and we have to start doing sensible policies. When the Prime Minister talks about, like putting a cap on emissions and yada, 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 and we're going to get to net zero by, it doesn't mean anything. Even if you took all the climate change emissions, if you stop them all today, the problem is that the existing climate would go on for 50 years at least. So that's all long-term nonsense. What we need to do is adapt. We're going to have severe weather. Let's build up our infrastructure and let's be sensible.
Most of what you said just depressed me, but hopefully someone listens when you say adapt. Let's see if Mark has some better news for me. Mark, do you have better news for me other than movie stars like to use private jets to go to movie sets or to climate change conferences? Like, what are we looking forward to in 2022? The end of 2021, it's been this bizarre thing of a movie comes out in the theaters and then days later you can get it on streaming for $24.99. And you don't have to pay $12 to leave your home, but you got to pay $25 to watch it on the much smaller screen. Is that here to stay? Are we going to see a return to Cineplex? What?
So, Brian, I think people are going to be going back to the movie theaters. Just since they reopened this past July across Canada, 8.3 million Canadians have gone back to the theaters. I think this idea of everybody staying home and either renting something on demand or waiting for it to come onto Netflix or Crave or Amazon or any other one of those streaming services, it's just not practical. I mean, I think we are built as a society to go out and be part of a crowd and experience entertainment as part of a crowd. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of options in the theaters for people who don't want to sit parse every word from Justin Trudeau, or doesn't want to get depressed by climate change. You can go out to the movies, you can be thrilled and entertained. A lot of the movies that are going to come out next year are movies that have been delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but theaters are reopened. The biggest movies in Canada this year were No Time to Die, James Bond movie.
We waited a year and a half for that one.
Yes, Black Widow. I mean, it was all movies that were sort of on the shelf for a year and a half. Next year, there's going to be Tom Cruise in Top Gun. That movie was supposed to come out last year. So there's also going to be Tom Cruise in another Mission Impossible movie. And then there's going to be a whole whack-a-doodle of superhero films for people who are into that as well. So I think going back, being out at movie theaters, going to concerts, that's all going to come back in a big roaring way. We're not, like I said earlier, we're not built to sit at home on our couch and just be isolated from one another.
Okay.
These are
experiences. Give me 2 or 3 movies that you want to see, because you've always got your finger on the pulse and you've always got your lists on a weekly basis, what's coming up on TV, what's coming out in the theaters. Looking ahead in the next couple months, I mean, you don't have to go to next December, but next couple of months, what are you looking forward to?
Well, Brian, just in the next couple of weeks, you've got a new Spider-Man and you've got The Matrix 4. I mean, there's huge anticipation for those. The Matrix 4 will have its premiere in Toronto and the stars are going to be here. They're going to walk the red carpet. That's a big thing to have happen here in the city. And then getting into 2022, you've got, like I mentioned, Tom Cruise doing Top Gun 2. Top Gun Maverick. I mean, that's a movie that you have to experience and see on the big screen. And then later into next year, you've also got Tom Cruise coming back for Mission Impossible 8. And I mean, I know he does the craziest stunts, all in a bid to thrill and amaze fans. So what else? What more do you need? So those are some that pop to mind right away.
All right, well, those are 3 that I would want to see on the big screen, especially Top Gun Maverick. Have you ever sat in those action seats where if it's a plane moving, the seats move? That's amazing. First time I saw it was Dunkirk. Absolutely amazing. You don't get that at home watching Prime, do you, Danette? It's a different experience, but we have become accustomed to watching more at home, and even streaming. You know, some of the streaming services are now starting to bring out episodes once a week, just like we used to get excited about Thursday Night and Friends, or
remember that?
Yeah, I do. Sadly, I do. So regular TV, I mean, what's on offer? I guess final season of This Is Us will come out, but what's on the streaming or regular TV horizon that's got you excited?
Oh, you just said This Is Us. I'll have my Costco-sized Kleenex boxes at my side while I watch the final season. There is a show coming from Jimmy Fallon called That's My Jam. And I know that's kind of cheesy, but it takes all his musical sketches from his talk show and he's put it on a television show all together. He has celebrity guests. The previews look hilarious. There was a sneak peek a couple weeks ago and it was fantastic with the judges from The Voice. But the show that I'm looking forward to, just because of the pandemic, is the next season of The Amazing Race. It was, I mean, I don't understand. I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, they filmed it. It's done. It wrapped, I believe, in October.
Hold on. They went around the world again. It wasn't just the stay inside one country one.
No, imagine you're just at home doing The Amazing Race. No, they traveled around the world, and I believe they started it before the pandemic started. They were in the UK, and then they had to put a stop, and they held off for about 18 months before they figured out a safe, COVID-safe plan. I believe they chartered a plane, and that's how they got around the world. But interacting with other countries, it's going to be kind of fascinating to watch, because I barely go to the grocery store. I do go to the movies, though. I have gone to the movies, but I can't imagine traveling from country to country to country. I mean, I'm not part of the Liberal government, so I can't travel all over the world. But I mean, I'm interested to see how they tackle all that with masks, with different the different situations in every country. It's going to be fascinating.
So we won't have the suspense of someone potentially missing their flight at the airport because they're all on a charter, but
they're on a charter.
we'll have different suspense. Right now, all of what Mark and Danette were just talking about sounds a lot better than what I was talking about. My big story for 2022 is the one that I'm worried about, and that's inflation. I'd rather not talk about the movies getting more expensive, the popcorn getting more expensive, the streaming services, rent, food, everything. But sadly, it's happening. What's the government going to do about it? Can they do anything about it? They could stop spending so much. That's part of what I think we're going to see over the next little while. But they could also raise interest rates through the Bank of Canada. That's got to be worrisome for anyone with a fixed rate mortgage, especially lines of credit, certain types of credit cards. These are all things that are going to impact us over the coming year. And it is going to become one of the biggest stories. They keep trying to say in the House of Commons right now, the Conservatives are playing this up. This isn't real. You're just trying to mislead people. No, I think we can all see when we go to the grocery store, when you try and do a home repair, go to the hardware store, everything is far more expensive than it was. I'm a late starter on Christmas shopping, so I'm just getting going, and sticker shock absolutely happening. So that is going to be the big story for 2022. And hopefully it starts to come down and we get these supply chain things figured out so that there actually is products on the shelves. If you've talked to some snowbirds in parts of southern United States who've headed down, they're actually empty shelves that we have not seen here in Canada yet. Let's hope it doesn't get to that. All the best in 2022, and keep reading each and every one of them in the pages of The Sun, because where else are you going to read them? It's going to be a blast in 2022. Let's hope it gets better. Let us know what you think. Drop a comment down below, and of course, share on social media.